This is our project that we're just wrapping up. It was a 5-year project in the last EGP cycle. It was a large collaborative project with people from the University of Alberta, Carleton University, across the GSC, and from the Gwich'in Renewable Resources Board. And the project was co-funded by ArcticNet. And the objectives of the project was to better understand how climate change is going to be impacting, or already has begun impacting, one of the world's largest watersheds, and this is the Mackenzie River Basin. And for the project, we only looked in the Gwich'in settlement area. The project we didn't have the capacity to look at this entire river basin that crosses multiple territories and provinces. And this project really came about because there was low water levels that affected barging down the river, and that resulted in goods and services not being able to be transported to the Canadian Arctic Islands. So we wanted to examine long-term trends and cycles and see if we could develop predictive models. So were these low water levels the result of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation or the El Nino Southern Oscillation, or 21st century climate warming? So one of the things we did in the project was look at the GRACE satellite, the NASA satellite, and this was done by John Crowley at the Canadian Geodetic Survey. And you can see right here, this little green, that's the Gwich'in settlement area. So we only looked there, and you can see that there are these a declining trend over the past 20 years, and then a recent increase. And really, we haven't done this yet, but we want to examine this data in the context of known climate cycles. And then we also looked further back in time. To do that, we collected peat cores and peat monoliths. And as Alec described, we used oscillations as well. And with these, we can quantitatively reconstruct depth to water table. So the Gwich'in Renewable Resources Board collected the peat cores during COVID because we were not allowed to enter the territory, and they did so with a logistics grant from ArcticNet that provided the helicopter time. The type of peat core was developed at Bill Shattuck's lab at the University of Alberta. That's the Swamp Laboratory, and it's a modification of Belarus core. It just essentially, it doesn't compress the peat when you're collecting it. And here's some photos of the device and its collection. And then those cores were shipped to the University of Alberta, frozen, where they were subsampled. And here's the scheme of subsampling. We cut off the edges of it to remove any influence of contamination, and then subsampled different slices for the various analyses. And those analyses were radiometric dating. We used the Hawk pyrolysis machines at GSC Calgary to evaluate organic matter. ICP-MS data was done at the University of Alberta. Jason Ahad's lab at GSC Quebec did PAHs. The petrology lab at GSC Calgary did organic matter characterization using petrology. Mercury at GSC Atlantic, and so on and so forth. And then we also looked at the micropaleontology. Shown here, we used pollen and spores, plant macrofossils, charcoal to reconstruct fire history, and tested amoeba. And then ongoing, adjacent or parallel to the Western science work was a traditional knowledge study, and that was funded by ArcticNet and led by the Gwich'in Tribal Council and the University of Victoria. So I'll show you the Western science results only. The 4 highest quality peat cores were collected with that titanium coring device. Only one was ombotrophic, so that's MAC S3 right here. So it has a pH of less than 4, and that basically means it's rain-fed. So it's not getting water from groundwater. It's getting water almost entirely from rain and then atmospheric deposition. So metals are going to be atmospherically derived as opposed to derived from groundwater. So this gives us a nice opportunity to compare where these metals might be coming from. So here's some photos of that peat bog and collection. And I'm just going to show you the results from that one bog. I don't have time to get into all of the stratigraphies. So to date, all of these peat monoliths, we have to actually pick plant macrofossils. You can't just use bulk organic matter. All of the plant macrofossils have to be identified because different types of plants fractionate carbon in different ways. So only certain types can be identified. So it's a lot of work. This is our chronology for MAC S3. We combined lead-210 for the upper part and then the radiocarbon chronology for the lower part. So the core extends back to about 6,000 years BP. And then we looked at various different types of elements. So strontium is a nice indication of lack of groundwater or input from groundwater. And you can see the MAC S3 stratigraphy for strontium here reflects its ombotrophy, so it's not receiving very much groundwater relative to the other ones. And then we looked at various total metal concentrations and ratios. These are just some of them here, just as an example, like lead to copper ratios can tell you where the lead is coming from. Higher ratios indicate from burning, so smelting, coal burning, and this can really be long-range transport. You can even see this in Greenland ice cores from Roman lead production. So these are pretty sensitive indicators of atmospheric contaminants. Overall, the concentrations are low. They're below CCME soil quality guidelines, so there really isn't anything of concern in here. We're more interested in how climate and water level change is influencing metal concentrations. We ran mercury at GSC Atlantic, pretty low, below the soil quality guideline for inorganic mercury. And this is just raw data. Can't really interpret mercury without the organic matter influence, so we need to evaluate that still. And then we did eco-hydrological reconstruction. So this was done using the plant macrofossils. Here on the y-axis is all of the radiocarbon dates for MAC S3, and then all the different types of plants. And based on what plants were growing at what time, you can reconstruct the environment that changes from, in this case, a poor fen to a bog and various changes in hydrology. So we're going to integrate that to see if we can better understand changes in metal concentration in this context. And then here's the depth to water table reconstruction using testate amoeba, and this is quantitative, so we can actually say centimeters below water table depth, or how many centimeters below surface the water table depth was. And you can see there was a very dry period that occurred about 310 years ago. So this is the data we have to play with. We haven't done the eco-hydrological modeling or forward modeling yet. We haven't integrated this with known climate indices, but we will be. And this is a summary of the project, a number of publications, open files, theses. We had one Simply Science story, and I just included the two quotes here. One is from Arlen Charlie, who is the Culture and Heritage Coordinator for the Gwich'in Tribal Council, and the other was from Julianne here. So she was a Gwich'in youth that collected the P-cores, and just sort of their experience of being involved in this project, which I think is really positive. And sort of a good catalog of the Western Science component is in this GSC open file that was done by PhD student Ann Nguyen, and we translated the front end and the back end of the open file into Gwich'in. We also have a number of plain language summaries. These are all uploaded onto the Polar Data Catalog. And then next steps, now we've collected all of the data. We're a little behind due to COVID. We need to integrate it and conduct meta-analyses to see how all of these data components fit together. So thank you for your attention.